Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. You guys know what video this is. This is going to be my June wrap up and I am very excited to be filming this video. June has probably been the best reading month for me this year because I had so many 5-star reads. I also had a lot of 4-star reads and I also had a few DNFs. A lot of these books that I'm going to talk about are in reading vlogs, so if you guys want to see my reactions to the books, if you guys want to see like clear-cut reviews of the books, you guys can check out those vlogs. I'll try to link them down below. But without further ado, we're going to be talking about all of the 12 books that I read this month. I'm going to start off with the first book that I read, and I have all of the books right here for you guys to see. The first book that I read is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. This is a part of apparently an interconnected standalone series as well. I'm not sure what the series name is, but this is the first book. This is about Kristen and Josh. And Kristen and Josh were strangers, but something happened. A mishap on the streets happened and they met and they realized that their best friends are getting married and they end up hanging out more often because of that. Something else happened and they end up being around each other so much more and they become really close friends. However, Kristen, who obviously realizes that there's some sort of connection and chemistry with Josh, does not want to get over that boundary of friendship, which is why the book is called The Friend Zone. There's a reason as to why Kristen doesn't want to cross that line. First of all, she has a boyfriend. Second of all, she doesn't want and cannot have a big family. Josh is the type of person who wants to have a big family. He wants to have kids. He wants to be a dad. But Kristen cannot give him that. What I liked about this book was the beginning portion when they first met. So I really liked the banter and the chemistry during those first few chapters. I also really liked their friendship as they got to know each other. But what I didn't like was the reason as to why Kristen doesn't want to get together with Josh. So she has this underlying condition that doesn't allow her to get pregnant very easily. In my opinion, it is big miscommunication because Kristen never tells Josh the reason as to why she doesn't want to be with him when it's pretty obvious that he likes her and she knows that he likes her. It is also very frustrating to see her push and pull Josh around the relationship. Honestly, I love Josh's character in this. He is very respectful, very caring, confident, and he doesn't cross any boundaries that Kristen put. She could have just said the reason as to why she doesn't want to be with him. She could have said it out loud. It would have not changed anything and we didn't have to go through so many pages of this book. But she didn't tell him and he had to have his own little assumptions in his head, and it's very frustrating to see. Also, I mentioned this, but she has a boyfriend, and to me that's like emotionally cheating because she knows she's attracted to Josh, and it's very painful to see that, and it's what really threw me off with this book. I also didn't like the ending. The ending was a cop-out. It was so easy to just end that way. I feel like the ending should have been different, and if it was different I would have rated this higher, but this ended up being 2.5 stars. I think in the vlog that I read this book, I put it at 3 stars, but thinking about it again, it's definitely 2.5. I am giving this above 2 stars only because I really enjoyed Abby Jimenez's writing and her banter. Her prose is also really good. I just didn't like the plot. So that is why this is 2.5 stars. This book I read is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This is the first book in the Caraval trilogy, I think. This is about a carnival that happens in this fantastical world. In this carnival, there are games, there's a prize to be won, and the main character, Scarlett, she really wants to be a part of this game, this carnival. She writes letters to Legend, who is the master of the carnival, every single year up until she gets engaged to her fiance. She has a fiance, not a very good fiance. The last letter that she writes to Legend ends up giving her tickets to visit his carnival, and to enter Caraval, which is the carnival, you have to have tickets. It's an invite only type of carnival. However, Scarlett, having grown up, she decides that she doesn't want to go to Caraval anymore, but her little sister still wants to go. Something happens and she ends up going to Caraval. She also has 3 tickets. She has one for her, one for her fiance, and one for her sister. I don't want to talk too much about this because I went to this plot very blind. The back of this book basically doesn't talk about anything. Overall, Caraval was a great read. I didn't want to get into this book for a while because I thought that it was not going to be my style of writing, but Apparently someone on the comments said that I was a completionist and that I have to get this trilogy done before I read Once Upon a Broken Heart, which I really want to read. So I ended up reading Caraval. The writing is very whimsical. A lot of people have said that and I do believe in it. The stakes are high in this book, but you don't really feel like the stakes are very high because of how it's written, and everything is so confusing. Honestly, I read this book and I was just half of time I didn't know what was going to happen. Very unpredictable. There's this one character, Julian, who appeared in this book, and I loved his character. He was very mysterious. I didn't know what he was, who he was, what role he plays. It was all so fun to read about him, but I actually didn't really like Scarlett, who is the main female character. She was super naive, doesn't listen to anybody, stubborn as heck, but is putting herself through situations that should and can be avoided if she listened, but she didn't because she is stubborn. It was a little bit frustrating to read because of her. Overall, the storyline was very unique, very fun. The ending was very unexpected. I don't know if it's because Scarlett's character made the story flat, but I felt like it was flat. I felt like I didn't want to pick this book up as soon as possible. There wasn't this like urgent feeling for me to read this book. So I ended up giving this book, Caraval, 3.5 stars. The next book I read is Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This is the third book in the Book of the Year trilogy. And the Book of the Year trilogy talks about Jude, who is a human living in the Fae world. When she was young, her parents were murdered in front of her eyes, and the murderer took her along with her sister, her twin sister, and her sister over to the Fae world, and she has since then lived in the fairy world as a human. In this fantasy world, fairies look down on humans, and so all her life, she has always been looking behind her back and trying her best to get stronger and more powerful. Queen of Nothing was the ending. It was extremely good. It was the cake on top for the whole series. Cruel Prince was kind of marketed as a romance book, romance fantasy book in TikTok, but I went into this knowing that it was more fantasy than romance. It was fantasy with a subplot of romance, and I do agree there is barely any romance with the first book, The Cruel Prince, and the second book, The Wicked King. But when you get into The Queen of Nothing, you finally see the romance bloom. So in the first two books, it's mostly politics, talking about war and Jude climbing her way up to getting power. And in The Queen of Nothing, you kind of see everything unfold. You get to see everything out in the light, and that was what made this book extremely interesting and extremely exciting to read about. And also the romance between Jude and Cardan in here was so good, and I also really liked Jude and Cardan both as individual characters in this book the most. I really didn't like Jude in The Wicked King, and I really didn't like Cardan in The Cruel Prince. So The Queen of Nothing took the cake for me. It was 5 freaking stars. The rest of the two books I rated 4 stars, but this one was 5 stars all the way. I had so much fun, couldn't put this down. The next book I read is Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. This is a novella to Sorcery of Thorns. It is supposed to be a fan service book that was released because Sorcery of Thorns got so much love and hype. This book was just, it was so good. I loved it because I get to see all of my favorite characters in this book. There is Elizabeth, there is Nathaniel, and there is Silas. And I cannot talk about this book without spoiling Sorcery of Thorns. So you guys have to go and read Sorcery of Thorns to read this book. But 5 stars as well. Next up, I will be talking about these books together because they're part of a series. I think I get to stop talking about them. If you watched my other videos, you'll know that I talk about this series constantly now because ever since I started reading it, I fell in love and I cannot stop. We are going to be talking about the Throne of Glass series, and the 3 books we're talking about is Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows. So I read these 3 books in the month of June, and look at my annotations. If this is not proof that I love this book so much, nothing is. So Crown of Midnight is the second book to the Throne of Glass series. The first book is called Throne of Glass, and the first book talks about this assassin called Selena Sardorthian. She is a very well-known assassin in this fantasy world, and one day she gets captured. She gets sent to Endovir, which is a slave mining camp. But one day the crown prince of Adarlan, which is the city that she lives in and where Endovir is, comes and offers her a way out of this slave mining camp, and that is to participate in this competition to become the king's champion. And if you become the king's champion, if you win and become the king's champion, you have to kill for the king. You are essentially a private assassin for the king. And Selena really hates the king. At first she doesn't want to be a part of it, but because she really doesn't like her life in Andovier, she accepts the challenge. When she arrives at the castle where all the competitors are, something dark happens. One by one, some of the champions start dying, and there's this really dark force behind it, and Selena ends up getting caught in the middle of all this. I rated the first book 4.5 stars. I really freaking loved it. And at first I did rate this 5 stars because when I finished reading it, I just couldn't understand why this book existed because it was so good, and I don't understand how Sarah J Maas could ever think about this kind of plot. When I thought about it again, this is definitely 4.5 and not 5 stars, because when you end up reading the third and the fourth book in this series, you'll know why this is not 5 stars. It's not super 5-star material. Still a really good transitional book to Heir of Fire, and I really enjoyed Selena's growth in this. What I didn't like that much about this book was actually the romance. I ate it up for a bit when I was reading it, but when it reached the end, it was a little bit, something happened essentially. I didn't really like the romance. That was what kind of threw me off, and I ended up rating this 4.5 stars. Then we jump into Heir of Fire, which is the third book. This book was so good. It was so much better. You get to see Selena grow a lot in this, and you get to see her powers grow in this. I finished this really quick for a 500-page book, and it's because I couldn't stop reading it. And I think out of all the books, this has the most annotations. In the Throne of Glass series, the books have a lot of point of views. There's a lot of characters, so you get a lot of POVs, and it's in third person. At first I was thrown off about it, but as I continued reading, I realized that those POVs are much well needed. It was amazing. There's a character that appeared in Heir of Fire that I loved so much. So Heir of Fire is 5 freaking stars. Queen of Shadows, which is the fourth book, also freaking loved even more. I loved it even more than Heir of Fire. The romance, the relationships that grow in this book. You get to see the friend group, that big friend group, the found family, start growing in this book, and it was so good. And I cried in this book. I think this was the only book that I cried in. I didn't cry in Heir of Fire and Craft Midnight. Unfortunately, this is not any reading vlog because I was reading this when I was traveling. It was off the charts. The plot was amazing. Selena's character in this was also freaking amazing. She is such a badass bitch. Loved her character so much. Queen of Shadows is also 5 stars, but if I could rate it, it's probably 6 stars. And then I read these 2 books in another reading vlog as well, and those reading vlogs are very in depth, so I don't really want to talk too much about these books. First one is Happy Place by Emily Henry. Happy Place is about Harriet and Wynne. They have been dating for a very long time now, but they recently broke up, and they're a part of this friend group. And this friend group, they go to Miami, I think, or Maine, I don't remember. They go to this beach house every single year, and this friend group was created when they were in college, and now Harriet and Wynne are, I think, in their 30s. You get to see people grow from when they were in college in their 20s up to their 30s when they're working, and they don't really have time for each other anymore. And it's very heartwarming, loving, so painful to read about, because you get to see people change and you get to see people grow, and sometimes it's not easy to see people change and grow. This book kind of teaches you the beauty of changing and growing in your life. I cried like a baby. I was sobbing when I was reading this book. Look at my annotations. I annotated so much. The writing in this, the prose in this, it was so good. I felt like Emily Henry definitely upped her game with this book. I loved this book so much. No one can tell me anything otherwise. People have said that this has the miscommunication trope, but in my opinion, it doesn't have the miscommunication trope. I hope you guys read this book, and I hope you guys enjoy it because I loved it so much. Check out my reading vlog because that one is a lot more in depth. 5 stars. Once again, if I can, 6 stars. The second book I read in that vlog is Fourth Wing. As you can see, my annotations also quite crazy. This is by Rebecca Yarros. This is a fantasy book. It's the first book in, I think, a 5-book fantasy series, and it talks about dragons. We are following our main character, Violet. She is supposed to be entering the Basquiat War College, which is this school in this fantasy world, and she is supposed to be entering as a scribe quadrant. So I think, as I remember, there are 4 quadrants in this school, and the scribe quadrant mostly works in libraries. They archive things. Then her mom, who is the commander of these dragon riders, she asked Violet to enter the writers quadrant, which means she ended up entering the college to apply as a dragon rider, but Violet is frail and weak, and she has, I think, an underlying sickness condition that makes it easy for her bones to break, and so she never really trained to be a dragon rider, but because her mom forced her to, she ends up entering the rider squadron. There is this really cute thing that happens in this book at which where the dragon has to bond with the human, and when they bond, you get this like telepathic thing. Dragons can send messages to the riders through telepathy, and it was very, very cute to see Violet and her dragon communicate. I really liked those parts of the book. I made fun of this book a little bit. If you guys watched the vlog, you'll know I made fun of this book because I kept saying that Satan, which is the main male character of this book, I kept saying that his only personality was being 6'4", because honestly the first few chapters of him being introduced to this story, it was all about him being really, really tall, really big, and Violet's really small. So I made fun of it because honestly I find that trope just really, really funny in a lot of romance books. But his character grows a lot and I really, really loved him. The ending took me by surprise. The ending was very, very unpredictable and I loved the ending. I loved Satan at the ending. It was so, 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 so good. That was what bumped this book up half a star rating. It was supposed to be 4 stars, but this ended up being 4.5. The reason why it's 4 stars is because this book was very predictable. The Fourth Wing ended up being 4.5 stars because I truly enjoyed this book and I'm so, so excited for the second book to come out, which is going to come out I think this November, so I'm very excited about that. The next book I read is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I actually started this book before I started Happy Place, but I stopped this halfway because I really wanted to read Happy Place, and then I continued off after I finished Happy Place. When I finished reading this book, I knew for a fact that this wasn't 5 stars. I, however, knew that it was going to be a high rating because I really like Emily Henry's writing. I think I enjoy her style of writing very much, and that's why I will probably never rate Emily Henry books very low. Maybe I'm biased too because I really like her and I like her writing and I like her plot, her stories. They're all focused mostly on familial growth, getting over family traumas or generational traumas, getting over conflicts between families and friends, and I think it's very relatable in my life, which is why I enjoyed reading a lot of her books. But with Book Lovers, I felt like it was very romance heavy. It was a lot more romance than her other books. I think it's very difficult to explain what the story is about, but it explores the relationship Nora has with Libby, and it's very strained because Nora is a semi-workaholic. She's a book agent and she works in the book industry, and Charlie, who is the male main character in this book, he is a book editor, and so they have crossed paths before. But one day Libby, who is her sister, asks her to go and accompany her to this small town called Sunshine Falls. Nora, who is a workaholic, usually doesn't go to these kind of trips. All she knows is work, but for Libby, she ends up going to Sunshine Falls with her, and she ends up meeting Charlie in this small town, and then things happen from there. I feel like the characters in this I couldn't really connect to. I couldn't even connect to her relationship with Libby. It was very difficult to read and kind of comprehend. Overall, I still really liked this book. I teared up a few times when they were talking about her and Libby's relationship, but this is definitely not high up on my Emily Henry list, but it is still 4 stars for me because I love her writing. She's always going to be one of my favorite authors of all time. Down to our last 2 books. Hang in there. I read Magnolia Parks next, but just Hastings. Look at my annotations, you guys. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have a lot of annotations for this book because this book was absolutely insane. This is about Magnolia and BJ. It's about 2 very toxic individuals who seem to be fated to be with each other, who seem to be soulmates, but treat each other like crap. If I have to explain this book, it's very much a chick flick teen drama. This is season 1. Daisy Hates is season 2. Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home season 3. And Daisy Hates The Great Undoing is probably season 4. I'm like watching a teen drama TV. 90210, Gossip Girl, everything. There's basically no plot in this book. It's up and down about Magnolia and BJ's relationship, them finding each other, something happens, they break up, something toxic happens, they break up, finding each other again, breaking up again, and it's very, very difficult to read. And I hated it. I really didn't like the 2 characters. I felt like both Magnolia and BJ, both equally, are very selfish, insecure, unstable, emotionally damaged. They were just not meant to be together. But I don't know how Jessica Hastings does this, but the way she writes makes us feel like they have to be together. So whenever they end up together, I just have this very, very happy feeling, but something toxic happens and I just go like, why the heck were they even together to begin with? But I was rooting for them. When they were together, I was rooting for them. But when they're not together, I wasn't rooting for them. And it was very difficult, very complicated, very frustrated of a feeling when I was reading this book. I wanted to give this book 3 stars in the beginning because of how this was no plot, just toxic vibes. But as I continued thinking about the book, I realized that I consistently thought about this book and I ended up giving this 4 stars. Her writing was beautiful. I felt like she was writing a poem. It was absolutely wonderful to read about and I enjoyed that so much. Once again, I love being in pain. So thinking about it again, this book was the book for me. I just was too much frustrated for it to be a 5-star book. We're down to our last book. The last book I read in the month of June is Reckless by Elsie Silver. This is a part of the Chestnut Springs interconnected standalone series. It's a cowboy romance. It's about Theo and Winter. If you guys read the first 3 books, you'll know who Winter is and you'll know who Theo is. Winter is the sister of Summer, who is the main character in the first book, Flawless. And Theo is the prodigy, the student of Rhett, who is also the main character of Flawless. There's this trope that is the secret baby in this. It is not a spoiler, but yeah, there's a secret baby trope in this. Winter gets pregnant with Theo as the dad. I don't mind babies in books. I don't mind kids in books as much anymore, but I didn't like how that baby ended up being a secret baby. It didn't really make any sense. Very vague. It was very weird that happened, that Theo didn't know it was his kid. I just couldn't wrap my head around it, so that was what really threw me off. The romance between Theo and Winter, the chemistry and everything was done really well because Elsie Silver does such a good job with putting 2 characters together and making them fireworks. Because of how it started, I don't understand why Theo fell in love with Winter. It felt kind of insta-lovey. That's my opinion, and that's why this book was only 4 stars. I think on the scale of the Chestnut Springs series, Heartless is still top, but Reckless is now the most bottom. I want to give it 3.5 because the writing was way too good. The chemistry between the couple was way too good. The romance was not cringy at all, which I really love, but the secret baby part, a little bit irritating. I wanted to quickly give a few shout outs to the books that I DNF'd. I don't usually include DNF books, but I don't usually DNF books anyway. I did DNF 3 books this time, not because they were bad, but because it was not the mood for me at the moment when I was reading it. The first book I DNF'd is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Exio. In general, this just was not the book that I was finding for at the moment. I'll probably get into it in the future, so not a big DNF, just a soft DNF. The second book I DNF'd is Fair Catch by Candy Steiner. This is not a proper DNF because I actually read this book. It's a reread. I just didn't end up wanting to continue reading the last 100 pages because I found it a little bit too cringy, and this was also not the book that I liked in the Red Zone Rival series. The last book I DNF'd is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. This is the first book in another interconnected standalone series. I didn't hate this book. I just felt like the trigger warnings were not for me at the moment. I just feel kind of mentally not ready to read this book yet, so it's not a big DNF, it's a soft DNF. I just don't want to read this book right now, so that's why I DNF'd Long Shot. But that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this wrap-up review type of thing. I hope it helped some of you guys. These are my stack of books. They're so pretty and I love them so much. And yeah, I read so many good books this month and I'm very happy about that. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Please don't forget to like this video and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you guys enjoyed. And I hope you had fun. I hope it helped some of you guys add a few books to your TBR, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!